The Dallas Mavericks have lost 4 straight. They put together a disgusting performance against the Jazz. I don't know what this late game defense was. Luka might as well have been asleep on the floor.
George Filipowski with Sexton and John Collins on the floor to close this one out.
Naji Marshall waving his teammates off. I don't need any help.
Oh, Collins! JC put the Mavericks to sleep.
And the Mavs are just an absolute disaster right now. Right? Well, kind of. First, we can talk about this Jazz game. The Utah Jazz have sneakily been the worst team in the league this year, other than maybe the Washington Wizards. Coming into this game against the Mavs, the only 2 wins they had on the year were the Bulls and the Spurs. They had the second worst point differential in the league, and then the Mavs, who made the finals last year, basically just lost to the Western Conference version of the Wizards, aka the Utah Jazz. And I'll be honest, I will never understand what exactly happened on this last play by Luka. But when you look at their numbers, the Mavs are not a bad basketball team right now. They're top 15 in both offensive and defensive rating, even when they're accounting for all these new pieces that they've added and trying to integrate all these new players. The reality of the situation for Dallas is that they've played a really tough schedule to begin the season, as have most of the Western Conference teams. The only bad teams they've really played to begin the year were the Bulls and the Jazz, and they didn't have Kyrie or PJ Washington in this most recent game against Utah, albeit they still should have won the game. So everyone's freaking out, but I'm not really sure that they should be. The hardest thing right now about the Mavs in terms of figuring out where they're at, are they actually good, is it's impossible to compare them to the team they were at the beginning of last year, the team that they were at the end of last year, and then, of course, the team that they are this year. All 3 different versions of those Mavs teams are extremely different. Obviously, there's no more Derrick Jones. They brought in Klay Thompson. They brought in Naji Marshall, who just cannot make a shot right now. And a lot of the offseason attention was around Klay Thompson. And for the most part, Klay Thompson has been fine for Dallas. They're still trying to figure out ways to integrate him, but his shooting and the threat of his shooting is absolutely still a thing, as I talked about in an off-season video. But one of the things that they're struggling with Klay right now is kind of the reason that he ended up leaving Golden State. They're overusing him a little bit offensively. He's a little bit too involved offensively. And that was kind of an issue towards the end of his time there in Golden State, where Klay still feels like he should be super involved. He should be the third offensive option, when really it's Kyrie, it's Luka, and then Klay should be in that like PJ Washington level of usage, where he's just going to be on the wings and try and get up 5, 6, 7 threes a game in Klay's case. And they're not really there right now. It feels like they're still trying to figure out a way to tell him, hey, you don't need to be as involved offensively as you are. And I think as the season goes along, they'll figure that out. The other problem with the Klay situation is something we anticipated in the offseason on this channel. Defensively, the combination of Kyrie, Luka, and Klay Thompson is just not all that sustainable. It's really going to be a struggle to guard at an elite level. You can kind of figure it out, maybe be a top 15 defense, as they have been to begin the season. But the defensive drop-off of someone like Derrick Jones, obviously, to what Klay Thompson now is really, really difficult for the Mavs to figure out right now. And on top of all that, Luka is not shooting the ball that well. His efficiency numbers are not great. He's not shooting well from 3, and he's always been a little bit more of a high volume, high turnover, shot chucker kind of guy that obviously is an incredible offensive player, but he just hasn't been quite right. And this has been something that's been a theme for him over the last couple of years, kind of working his way into shape. And obviously towards the end of the year, I'm sure he'll be better. The bright side for Dallas is that Kyrie has been playing out of his mind. He has put up incredible shooting splits so far. He didn't play in the Jazz game last night, but when he has played, he has been awesome. The perfect combination of being involved and then getting out of the way and letting Luka do his thing. He's been super efficient. This has been one of the best few week stretches of Kyrie's career ever offensively. Now, that's also kind of a negative because he's been as good as he is, and then they're only 5-7. But again, the schedule, how tough the West is, has a lot to do with that. Now, to mention the fact that a couple of key guys like Derek Lively, PJ Washington have missed a couple games, and Maxi Kleber's only played like 3 games the entire season. So they've definitely had some injury issues as well. But if I was a Mavs fan, here's the number one thing that would make me nervous. When you look at this roster, when you're trying to figure out who's going to play on a night-to-night basis, they really only have like 6 guys that they can count on right now. The Naji Marshall thing is a real issue for them right now because he's basically unplayable from an offensive standpoint right now. They brought him in on the mid-level exception to not necessarily be the Derrick Jones replacement, but to be something close and to be that complementary piece for them on the wing that can go out and guard guys, and he just has not been good at all. And if he's not in the rotation or not someone that you can count on, they really don't have that many options. They have a couple of bigs that they like, of course, Kyrie, Klay, and Luka, PJ Washington, And then that's kind of it, especially if Kleber's not going to be healthy. And for a team that felt like it knew exactly what it was and was so cohesive on their run to the finals last year, this feels like a disconnected team, a team that's trying to figure out who they are, a team that's trying to integrate new pieces. And it feels that way because that is exactly what they are. They have so many different moving parts, even down to like Quentin Grimes still trying to figure out where his role is as one of the guards off the bench, what Jaden Hardy is going to be doing off the bench. They're still trying to figure out all these different pieces. But again, when you look at the advanced numbers, it's actually not that bad. So bottom line for me right now for Dallas, you're going to see a lot of people freaking out because the Jazz loss was bad and Luka was bad on defense, and he has been bad on defense all year long, as he pretty much always has been. I never bought the whole, oh, Luka can kind of guard thing. No, he can't. And they're going to have to figure out how to get him and Kyrie and Klay to be able to play together defensively. And if that answer isn't PJ Washington plus Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively, then they're going to have to bench probably Klay. Like, they're going to have to figure out a way to have a good defensive group out there, especially in playoff settings where teams are going to be attacking some of these switches against Luka, some of these switches against Kyrie and Klay. If they can't get those guys to guard together with the roster they have, they're going to have some interesting decisions to make from a rotation standpoint. But personally, I'm not that worried about Dallas. They weren't that good to begin the year last year. Then they made some changes and they figured it out. And obviously they've done that now a couple of times, but I'm expecting them to be right around the 5 or the 6 seed as we go into the postseason. I'm not expecting them to be a play-in team, and they'll probably be just as much a threat to make a run to the conference finals as any of the other teams kind of around that spot in the seeding in the Western Conference. That's just the way the West is this year. You're playing so many good teams on a night-to-night basis, and if you're the 5th or the 6th seed, you're probably just as good as the 2 seed. You just happen to not win as many games, maybe not be as healthy, maybe not be as cohesive, but on a night-to-night basis in a 7-game series, it's basically an even matchup. And as always, they'll be on the lookout for some kind of piece at the deadline. I definitely think they need another wing or someone that they feel good about from a three-point shooting perspective, because that was the whole point of bringing in Klay, was having an elite three-point shooter out there with Kyrie and with Luka. But now they're kind of missing the guy that can guard and can shoot. Like PJ Washington's supposed to be that guy. He hasn't been that good from 3 ever since that conference finals against OKC. Now, again, Najee Marshall was supposed to be that guy. I think that's been one of the biggest things that's kind of thrown a wrench in this. But at the end of the day, Luka's going to shoot the ball better. They're going to be more locked in defensively. They're going to get a little bit healthier if they add some pieces. I'm just not worried about Dallas. I can understand why you might be, because maybe you don't think that maybe you were down on the Klay fit in the first place. I wasn't, but maybe this is confirming to you. If you were not a fan of the move of bringing in Klay Thompson, then this stretch, this 12-game stretch, is confirmed to you. Oh yeah, the Mavs actually aren't that good, and the Klay thing was a mistake. I wasn't on that side of that, so maybe that's the only difference here, is that I was a Klay believer in this offense, and now I'm just kind of doubling down on that. But truly, the advanced numbers, when you watch them on a night-to-night basis, they don't look all that different to me from the team that made the finals last year, apart from a personnel standpoint. But in terms of the way they're playing, how they're playing, I think they'll ultimately be fine. Now, who knows? In a couple of weeks, maybe they're a couple of games more under 500, and then they start looking like, oh, we might be in the play-in. Then things get kind of drastic pretty quickly, right? You go from a team that was in the finals to potentially being in the play-in, and being in the play-in in the West is just not where you want to be, because there's so many good teams. So things can certainly change for Dallas, but at the moment, I'm not that worried.